William I became King of England following the defeat of Harold Godwinson at the Battle of Hastings in 1066. In spite of this victory, he still faced many threats. Anglo-Saxon earls and the native population did not want to be governed by a Norman duke. This made it vital that he asserted his power and authority to gain complete control of England. The feudal system was one way of assuring this. It was designed to form an effective delegated governance of the country, while still retaining the king's power.
The feudal system was an enforced power structure. It was based upon land tenure and homage. Land tenure dictated who owned the land and who had the right to use it. Homage was when a tenant would pledge their loyalty and submission to their lord, usually the king. In doing so, a clear social hierarchy was created.
Once he was crowned King of England, William I proclaimed that he owned all of the land in the country. This removed power from many land-owning Saxons. Their land was quickly redistributed amongst loyal Norman supporters with strict obligations. Men who were given land directly became tenants-in-chief. They swore homage, promising to collect taxes and to raise an army if they were required to do so.
A tenant-in-chief was not the owner of the land. This right belonged to the king. This meant that when they died, they lost the right to leave the land to their sons. Instead, the land was returned to the king. He selected an heir, who was usually the eldest son, who would continue the process of paying homage. If a tenant-in-chief failed to meet the expectations placed upon them, their land was forfeited. This meant the forced removal of their land rights by the king.
The land given to tenants-in-chief was vast. In order to ensure good governance and rule, they divided the land into areas known as fiefs. These were given to their best knights in return to homage to the tenant-in-chief. The knights were obligated to complete 40 nights of service per year, as well as to collect taxes and organise soldiers when required.
Knights often held entire villages. These were too big to personally farm. In order to enable effective management, the village was further divided. The knights would retain a plot, known as the demesne. The rest was given to villagers, who were known as villeins. The villeins were given plots to farm in return for compulsory labour service. They were required to farm the knight's demesne 3 to 4 days a week.
The majority of people within Norman society were villeins. They were tied to their lord's land and had little freedom. They were obliged to follow any given orders. Any failure to do so would result in brutal punishment.
The feudal system was based upon respect for the person above you in the social hierarchy or ranking system. All homages given had a direct link to the king and were sworn on the Bible. This was an extremely serious act, as the majority of the population were very religious. The feudal system reinforced the strength of the king's power by making everybody other than him a tenant. Nobody but the king truly owned the land. This was cost-effective, as it gave him an easy supply of men ready for service. If he did not own their land, he would have had to pay them to enter service. As he owned their land, men would obey him in order to keep their rights.